late, but we had a taxing and extensive pre-session, so we had to take a little break. So we'll start with the roll call, which we didn't do earlier.
Councilman Duper.
Present.
Councilman Daly.
Here.
Councilman Lenart.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tempore Popescu.
Here.
And Mayor Rigsby.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. We'll start with the invocation and pledge of allegiance. Councilman Duper, please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any items to be added or deleted?
No, sir.
Okay, time for oral reports, public participation. Are there any comments people would like to make on any items not on the agenda? I have 2 requests for agenda comments. No takers for non-agenda items. Okay. Then we have a conflict of interest issue. Item number 7 will require the drawing of straws, but we'll deal with that when we get to it. We have the consent calendar for your consideration.
I'll move.
Okay, is there any discussion, any opposition? Hearing none, the consent calendar is approved. Old business item 6, Council Bill O-2013-03. Community Development. Development Code Amendment.
Do we need to go through all the details again? Essentially, it's what we talked about last time, banning new drive-through construction of fast food, formula-based fast food establishments. We did take the mayor's advice and took a look at some of the language and our grammar and the way it's laid out. And we did look at the sunsetting provision and what determines closed. I think if you look at the staff report we reference, in the municipal code already we have a definition of when a business is closed and considered to be out of business, and then their business license is suspended and they're no longer allowed to operate or reestablish in a non-conforming manner. So I think we've covered what you asked us to cover, and the staff would like council to proceed with this.
Okay, before we do any markups and things, I think this would be a good time to get some public comment. It's not an actual public hearing, but there is a request from Dick Wiley to speak on this topic. So
it is
please.
a public hearing.
Is it?
Yes.
Doesn't say that on the agenda, but I guess we can do it that way. Shall we open it as a public hearing? Okay. I'll slam the hammer down. Come forward, Mr. Wiley. Theoretically, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Dick Wiley, Loma, Linda. Again, I would like to urge you to consider the whole ramifications of what this ordinance is saying. To me, there's a lot of language in there that is statements or comments. I don't see it backed up with facts, figures, or examples. And showing in there what you're asking, or what they are asking for, in the way of changes. It basically, in my opinion, it boils down to a philosophy and a desire. And in my opinion, this does not, philosophies and desires don't really run the country. We've got to go by certain rules and regulations. The one that keeps popping up in there, congestion, pollution, and noise. I don't know of a business in town that doesn't create this. And when you go through the Planning Commission, they look at this. If we see a problem, they try to resolve it and work it out with whoever it is. You probably got the letter that was sent in to you. It spells out most of it in there. To boil this down, one thing that wasn't explained or really discussed, there's only, I think, one reference to obesity. And I agree with that. When you watch the news, you watch people on TV, we are exploding. And I think with education, this will help, or could help, seriously, with the downturn of this. You can't blame it all on fast foods. In my opinion, you go to your schools. Your schools are cutting back on PE and outside activities. Without that extra energy to burn this off, you build it up. We have some programs in town that help with some of this. But on the other hand, I think, as it's stated there in a couple places on my report, if you close doors, you lose opportunities. If you open doors, it creates possibilities. If you want to really educate the public, especially in town, maybe they would work with you and say, yeah, if you want to put, together flyers or information or statistics or whatever, we would be glad to help promote this. If you push it hard enough, maybe some of these places would be willing to say, yeah, we could work with you. I don't know where the turkey burger came from at Carl's Jr. I read about it just before it came out in a book about eat this, don't eat that. Turkey burgers are healthier than hamburgers. Well, they're there, and it's stayed. I think working with these places, you could do that. There's an awful lot in there that would take, I think, a fair amount of time to go through. But when you look at this, also you've got a senior population that is coming on, the baby boomers. There was a comment about assisted living recently. There are 400,000 ones that turn 65 a year. And it's expected in the very near future that this will be up to 1 million a year. And you figure for probably 6, 7, 8 years, 10 years. What does that population, if obesity starts to come on, do? What does that do for the availability of people to get around? I mean, I've seen a lot of them in town, a heck of a time walking, they're so heavy. And if these numbers start to increase, again, then where are options and possibilities for them? And as I say, when you have some of the other concerns that are in there, aging, 1 in 6 right now in New York City, they said on the news just the other night, are over 65. That's a pretty good sized population. How are we going to deal with their overall needs before that gets to the point where we're behind the ball with them and saying, now we've got to make changes. So I think some of this bit with drive-throughs, it's an option. Granted, I think it could be improved. I think this discussion did not go completely with this whole town. I think a group discussed this, decided this, and pushed it. And I don't think there was a lot of input from, could we work with these places? Could they work with us? Did you talk to other parts of town and discuss with them, is this something that they would go with? In other words, is this ordinance supported by this whole town? If you want to say just because of the way this tends to read, if you'd want to put it down around the campus, the medical center, where a lot of this sort of broader discussion comes from, okay, I'm behind that if you want to try it. But then what happens if you put this in and it doesn't work? Or you wish you had it back? At that point, you know, it's hard to bring something back after you've been burned. So I think a little bit of time and study would create a better resolution to this, because if they want it, they'll go out of town. You'll buy it out of town. If you do that, this town loses the revenue. This town then would create more pollution, more congestion, and the other cities would gain from the revenue, as well as the businesses. So I think, again, this, I would hope, maybe take a little bit of time, discuss this with others in town. We don't have any figures as to how many restaurants, by number, the small restaurants, how many of those people eat in those places total? How many eat in hometown and into Napoli's? They're a little bit bigger. How does that compare with the drive-thrus or the fast foods? And I will bet you that probably your fast foods are up to around hometown buffet numbers. I think if a little study and look at that might surprise you how many people go to these places. And if all of a sudden, as the bottom line in this whole thing indicates, we want to prohibit drive-thrus in the future, and if these others decide to move out of town, there's no option for anything to come in. And I hope the way everybody was pushing for vegetarian and healthy foods, I didn't see anything in here about healthy foods. I think that's a mistake. But if you have it come in and you have ones that are totally behind a vegetarian drive-through, won't be able to do it. And you know, believe it or not, most of your drive-throughs, 80% of 75 to 80% are drive-through versus sit-down. So these type of things I would hope you would look at and consider seriously. I think some changes could be done, and I hope that that is the case. Thank you for your time.
Question.
Go ahead.
I just want to probe a couple of things with you because I have a lot of respect for you. You're a regular attendee here, and you take the city politics and functioning very seriously, and I commend you for that. I want to
try to
in
look
an
at the
effort
whole
to try
town.
to understand your philosophical perspective a little bit better, particularly related to freedom of choice and so forth. I mean, I think that every city has to deal with the economic incentives of certain business versus the cultural and environmental priorities that we believe are equally and in some cases more important. But do you believe that a city has a right and perhaps even a responsibility to articulate a vision for their community?
If it is the agreed overall perspective of improvement in a town, yes.
And what do you mean by agreement? Do we put it to a vote and a majority votes? Because we're never going to get a total consensus on everything.
Well, no, but if you're, because this hasn't gone before the whole city.
Everyone has a right, just as do you,
Right.
to participate in the city council meetings, and you do regularly, and as do others. So I would challenge the perspective that other people haven't had the right to weigh in on this, because if they stay tuned and in touch with the priorities and agenda of the city council, they have every right to speak out on this issue, as do you. So I think everybody does have the opportunity to weigh in on this based on the current system that we have.
Well, but when I look at that stated in that report, I don't see facts, I don't see figures, I don't see examples or explanations. I see comments. Well, in other words, how many of these people in this town don't want this? How many, would it really affect it? Say, I didn't know about it, but, now it's too late to speak out. These are the types of things I think that need to be looked at. And again, if that's what the biggest majority of this town wants, then that's okay.
How will we know that?
I would suggest probably that it needs to be publicized about what we are doing. I mean, I didn't see any articles in the local newspapers that come out here about it, period.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people pick that up, because I know when you go to Rite Aid, you walk in on a Thursday, they're there. By a Saturday or Sunday, they're gone. So
But you're not challenging the notion that part of our responsibility as a city council is to assess economic incentives, because you're correct, fast food restaurants do make money for the city, but to evaluate the balance between the economic incentives and our other responsibilities to define the cultural and environmental priorities that we might believe in.
Well, I think part of it, too, you've got to look at what's your separation between church and state.
I don't see this as a church-related issue.
Well, in some directions, I do. And in some of the way things go on at times, some of the examples that I can come up with real quick was you go back in time when the university was developing things, there was not the requirement for parking. And it became a parking problem in town. Problems had to be changed. Well, now if I put a business in, I have to meet certain requirements. Why wasn't this done? I mean, there's an awful close connection. And I understand that. But what I'm trying to say, if it's good for this, then why is it good for that?
Yeah, I think that we might be quibbling on where we draw the line. I mean, I
Right.
think that if we seemed to have a rush on development of bars or pawn shops or marijuana dispensaries, we probably wouldn't be quibbling about whether that would be an appropriate place to draw the line.
Yeah, like I stated in there, that if it's illegal, then, yeah, we have the right to do something. But along this lines, it's something that
Okay.
hopefully
as I said,
we'll have some options.
I have a lot of respect for your avid interest in the city of Loma Linda, and I know that you speak from your heart and you believe in what you're saying, and sometimes, I think most of the time we agree, sometimes we may disagree.
We're
But
all gonna
I
be
have a lot of
respectful
respect
of
for
each
your
other.
perspective. Sure.
And I think that going back to what you heard previously, the state says you're going to do this and you're going to do that, as she stated. Well, it's not directly a dictation, but, you're sitting here looking at that going, how are they telling us what to do? And this is what, I don't like to see this happen in our town, because this divides it, I think. Because a lot of things, there's a big Catholic majority that comes into this town and also is in the town. But that seems to be, another group. And when we do things, like city council, How many people constantly come? I can't tell you, and I don't know if you can come up with figures, how many people watch it on TV. What percentage of this town knows what's going on? Only when there's a situation I don't like do we come in and squawk, and then we leave. So they're not, in my mind, they're not supportive of the total city. And this is why I think working with them.
Thank you for your testimony.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, just to address the issue of the majority of the city, short of a plebiscite, it's very difficult to know what the majority is. And as I've said in some of my campaign flyers and things like that, when in a representative democracy you elect someone, it's incumbent upon the voter to select someone who has a philosophy of governing that's consonant with the voter's belief. And because we don't have the ability to do a straw poll or a vote of the people on everything, and even if this went to a ballot, historically in Loma Linda, I think it would be fair to say that the Seventh-day Adventist population votes in higher percentages than other populations. And, part of that's reflected in the fact that in the entire history of the city council, there's never been a non-Seventh-day Adventist city councilman. So I think it's very difficult to assess the mood of the entire community. But I can say in this circumstance that the inflammatory reaction to the passage of the entitlement for the McDonald's was a good example of how allowing things can sometimes divide the community, and sometimes at least giving fair warning to those coming into our city that they may be entering a hornet's nest, may avoid some of the division. So that's the basis upon which I have greeted the offerings from the Save Loma Linda or the Healthy Loma Linda Coalition. Save Loma Linda is a different group. I've greeted those with some agreement. So I'm having, to me, it's very difficult and one of the hardest things to do in local politics, because these things are not always driven by political philosophy, which I prefer. If there's a political philosophy driving something, then decisions are easy. Because there's no philosophy behind this and it's community taste, I'm a little bit like a fish out of water. I don't really have my natural moorings kind of fail me, and I look to the opinions of citizens, and there's a vocal minority that shows up on that side. There's a vocal minority that shows up on that side, and I have to weigh this stuff. And I see both sides as having merit. And you've produced a document that I think is very good. I read all 8 pages of it. I think it's very well done. And that's really concise down. And I'm with Councilman Daley in congratulating you on preparing that document. It took a lot of work. But I look at this as I've said before, moneyed interests versus community taste and freedom of choice. And that freedom of choice, there is a collective choice as well as a community. And there are communities in San Bernardino County and in Los Angeles County, Claremont, for example, where you go through that whole town and you can't find a fast food restaurant. And a lot of people like that, and that community likes that, and it is to your rendering a total vacuum of freedom of choice. None, because there aren't any fast food restaurants. But the people there made that choice, and they kind of like it. So, we can, I think, draw some kind of a line short of what they've done, which is to allow those that are already there to continue to exist without totally tramping on freedom of choice. Right. What's your response to that? Well, when I went to the 3 Healthy City meetings, coalition meetings, I didn't see anywhere where they were advertised as, hey, we're going to have this discussion. Now, how that was promoted and people were aware of it, other than
word of mouth. This is where I get into a problem. I mean, it wasn't pushed out to the community to say, we're going to be discussing things. Again, there was a group that came. The group that was there made the recommendations and suggestions, and it came to here. Now, if I go and get a group and make recommendations and suggestions and come to you, and the rest of the town isn't aware of it, that could affect the other part of town. And this is where, again, when you look at this whole thing, as I say, the demographics of the breakdown in this town is a little bit off. And I think that it's one of those things that a freedom of choice, as it boils down to, if you don't like it, don't buy it. If people don't like Stater Brothers and the business isn't there, Stater Brothers will leave.
But in its extreme, you could say the same thing about dens of iniquity. If you don't like it, don't buy it. But at some point, there's a community interest in keeping certain elements out of the town and making that choice unavailable. I think you'd have to concede that there is a line. And then we're, like he said, quibbling over where the line is. Because there's a legitimate line. But where should it go is the question. And we're trying to decide where that line should be for fast food restaurants.
I'm also concerned, Mr. Wiley, about your suggestion that we publicize certain agenda items in order to attract more public input. The agenda of all items on the City Council are already posted on the web, and I wouldn't know where to draw another line in terms of, well, this one looks like maybe a lot of people are going to be interested. We're going to post it on trees or sign. I don't know how we'd make those decisions anyway. And so our assumption is that if our constituents are concerned or interested, they'll stay in touch with what's going on here just by turning on Channel 3 if they have cable, or looking up the city webpage because the agenda's there. That's what you do.
Or they don't care.
Do. Pardon me?
Or they don't care.
And if they don't care,
that's
then
the problem.
That's our chronic problem. We don't know who cares and who doesn't.
Well, I think, again, looking back on a little, broader perspective of this, with this type of thing, if there is more working together in the community, people will come out and start to get together. You talk to one or two people about something, get them interested, they'll come. If they feel turned away, they're not going to come. Where I live, I put out a proposal about if you're interested in emergency disaster preparedness, let me know so we can work up when is the best time for you. What are you interested in? What possibilities do you have to help the community? Out of 142 units, how many do you think responded?
3.
Not a one. If you're not concerned about disaster preparedness, why the heck should I worry about you? You're going to come running to me and say, I need help.
I would say I've probably been the biggest opponent of this because of my personal beliefs, my libertarian beliefs, and it's an inside joke, but but I've always stated I'm one of the only 2 vegetarians on the council. I have my own personal health ethic, but I can't right now. I can't get past what we're talking about the apathy of the community. All of us here on this dais got involved and actually had to step out of our homes to get to this point, and do a lot of hard work to get to this point because we cared and we wanted to get involved. Mm-hmm. Most of us, I think, were upset with the direction we thought the city was going, and so we stuck our necks out, so to speak, to get here and put up with this. But I don't believe a majority of the city is in favor of this.
Okay.
But the strong minority that has consistently shown up and spoken out their will tells me that everybody else either doesn't have an interest or it is not that enough of an issue for them to get up and come to this meeting. And I personally have hoped that I would see a counterpart, a counter-argument, another group or a faction of the city to prove what I thought or what I believe, and I haven't seen it. And so I guess what it all boils down to is we have to act on what's in front of us and the voices that are speaking to us. And if those other voices are quiet or uninterested, then that's almost passively agreeing with it. So I'm at a point where I don't think this is as severe as it could have been, and I believe that it does fall in line with the philosophy of the town, and it probably is the right thing to do right now. But that doesn't mean we would make the same choice if it came down to some other thing that we thought was far more restrictive on our liberties. These type of ordinances have to be vetted out, and we're going to examine each and every one of them. And I don't think this one is too restrictive at this point based on the response that I've heard so far from the community, even the people that live in other cities.
Well, I would agree that, probably we won't see the ramifications of it until they leave. And then people, if they start squawking, saying, why'd they go? Well, we had open dialogue a while back, but nobody came, so you didn't come.
I still say this is one of the most desirable places to live, and I've lived in several homes and several places here in the city. And when my wife and I were looking for a new home recently, it was very, very hard to find one because they were going real quick. I don't think anybody's in a rush to leave Loma Linda. That's never going to be our problem. Our problem is going to be sustaining our services down the road. And that's something we have to figure out how to handle. But I don't think everybody's going to move out of town if this ordinance passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any comments from anybody else would like to speak? Because I can close the public comment. Okay, come on up, Andreas.
Hi, good evening, Council. Thank you, Mr. Wiley, also for your comments. I just wanted to confirm, or I guess to respond to the question about who cares or who's concerned about this issue in this town. And we did hold a number of community workshops, as Mr. Wiley stated, ranging from November all the way through April of this year. And we did have a lot of people show up regularly to these workshops, and those are people who care about this. This was publicized for the entire city to the general public on public display boards, online, even on the TV station as well. So this is something that's coming out of the community and something that the community has expressed a lot of interest in. We did hold a variety of workshops. As you know, we held focus groups as well in regards to the food environment in particular and the general built environment as well. So the general consensus that the message that I saw that came out of the community was that people do care about this town, they live here, and they don't want this to be a formula-based drive-through town, essentially. And we want to see this town continue growing in quality and character. And that would be it. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, servants of the city.
State your name and your Lawton Avenue address.
My name is Jan Nick, and I live on 24615 Lawton Avenue, next to the mayor. I was not planning on speaking. I was here just to support others from the Healthy Loma Linda Coalition. But I do want to let you know of my support for this ordinance. I, for many years, have been concerned about the character of the city. I'm not talking about the integrity. We have a lot of integrity here. But the character is lacking, and this is, I see, one attempt to begin to create an environment that is a small town feel and bring in other businesses that would support that. I've been to the meetings that have been conducted, and I've seen some of the vision that they have for creating bike paths and walkways and improving the visual aspects of the city as well as this. And so I just want to let you all know that I am a engaged Loma Linda citizen, looking forward to working with all of the citizens, you as well as the coalition, to improve the city.
We have another resident of Lawton Avenue, Dr. Kelm.
My name is Elmer Kelm. I live on 25246 Lawton and have lived there for about 40 years. My son lives in the house next to me, and I have grandchildren, so I'm very much interested in Loma Linda. But I'm making the same observation this evening that I've made before with the red light cameras and with traffic and so forth. We are a host city. Now, you can't knock what the people want for the people of Loma Linda. I mean, sure, we'd like to have good weight control. We would like the families to take responsibility, make sure their kids don't go to McDonald's, if that's how you feel about it. But that's for the 18,000 people that live here. And the only time that's ever going to be a reality is when the university moves out of Loma Linda and takes the whole industry out, that you can have your little Loma Linda. You can't have it as long as you have your educational institution and your medical center. There was a report in the Press Enterprise at the beginning of the year that in any day in Loma Linda, there are 60 to 80,000 people come here. And if you ask those people what they want most, what they miss most, my wife plays piano in the lobby of the hospital 2 days a week or 2 afternoons a week. Number one is a parking place. They'll always complain about no parking. And number two, the second complaint is no place to get a quick bite. And of course, they always say no place to get a good cup of coffee. And I don't know if you know it now, coffee is now a health food. I know we'll deny that a little bit, but the stats are there. You're supposed to drink 4 cups a day to be healthy. Hard to swallow? Well, I'm talking about this other population. The only reason we're here is because we have this medical center. Only reason we're here is because these 80,000 people come here every day. Right there above your head, it says serving man. The man they were talking about serving aren't the 18,000 people that live here. It's the people that come here for the medical service. And so I do think that the visitors of the patients, primarily those people that visit patients, should have a convenience. So I'm sorry, I just got back from a visit to Alaska and Canada. I haven't read any of this material, and I know that one of the problems is traffic. You know what my hometown in Chilliwack, British Columbia did, the hospital where all my children were born? You know what they have in the lobby? They have a McDonald's right in the lobby to make sure it takes care of the traffic problem outside. Novel idea, bring the food to the people if you think it's too much traffic. But nevertheless, I don't want to, for the 18,000 people that Loma Linda, you know, that's great. We'll protect them. We should look out for them. But let's look out for those 80,000 come. The nurses, the clerks, the students, the doctors, the janitors, the support people. Don't forget those.
I've got a question for you. Don't get away. You're one of the faithful attendees here, so we want to pick your brain a little bit. There's a restaurant index that divides the number of fast food establishments by the number of traditional grocery stores and produce vendors like farmers markets. We'll very shortly have 5 on the denominator of that equation. And we've got very shortly 7 on the numerator of that equation. So our ratio is 1.4. We've got 7 fast food restaurants, and we're surrounded by San Bernardino fast food restaurants that are close enough to almost count. historically, you look at communities like San Bernardino, it has a ratio of 5 or 6, 8, and you look at the California average is about 4.5 or something like that. What I'm saying is that if we were like the rest of California, we just let it go, we would end up with another 15 to 30 fast food restaurants just to hit the average. And my question is, we've got 7. Do we need 30? And your libertarian stance, I definitely identify with it from a philosophical perspective. You know, land rights, you own the land, you should be able to build whatever you want, but then there's the community taste to deal with. How do you justify just saying, as many as we want, no problem? Is that what you're saying? And if so, what's your justification?
No, that's not what I would suggest. I would suggest a efficient redistribution of the ones you have. In other words, can you get somebody to move into, well, let me ask you, in the new parking lot, is there going to be a coffee shop in there?
The brand new one?
The brand new coffee
The city
parking lot.
pushed hard to get a restaurant in there, and the university elected to put their security office in instead.
Well, you see, there's an error. There's one place you could have circumvented this, brought the thing to the people in a much more efficient way. Just like in my town, they took a fast food into the lobby of the hospital. Now, 7 restaurants certainly would be a lot, but I know where almost all of them are, and that's a way down on Redlands Boulevard.
Yeah,
and if you could get one of them up here on, or right inside the family practice building, and you know, we know that's not going to happen. But my push is, these people want fast food and conveniently.
But this ordinance does not prevent fast food. It only prevents drive-through fast food. So the things you're asking for are not even forbidden by this ordinance.
That's good news, isn't it?
I'm just wondering, is that enough? Does that satisfy you?
What's the restriction on parking in town? Are we limited to a certain number of parking lots?
No. Oh, there are people who used to be on the council
I know
who
that.
would have done that.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't prepare myself for this. I just want you to know that we keep forgetting the people that are the only reason we're here for.
We're trying to keep that in mind, and that's why I'm asking you these questions.
That's why we elect you folks, because we know you'll do the right thing.
Yeah. Thank you for your faith.
You know, I have to just respond to that, and unfortunately, I got to say this. Don't take this the wrong way, but I choose to live here because it's a quiet, safe community, and I could have lived anywhere. I still could live anywhere, but I choose to live here because the crime rate is low, the city is quiet, it's safe, it's comfortable, it's familiar to me. I mean this in a bad way either, but I don't care what goes on at the university because I don't work at the university, probably one of the only people in the room. But my interest in the city is that it's such a quiet, safe, pristine, livable town, and so I guess we have to think about those 18,000 people more than we have to concern ourselves with the university and its.
That's exactly my point. There are 2 different populations we have to think about.
Well, again, I don't know that I have to worry about the university's need to feed itself. Now, some of the healthy Loma Linda people that work for the university, maybe that's a consideration they should have. But I don't need that consideration because all I'm concerned with is when I come home, my home is safe, it's in a good neighborhood, my kids have good schools to go to.
You've indeed made a good choice. I live in Loma Linda also.
That's exactly.
I think we're looking at where we draw another line. We touched on some of these issues 2 weeks ago with the first hearing. And I think there was a consensus by some in the room, at least, that we probably have enough eateries in the city of Loma Linda for anybody that wants a cup of coffee and donut hamburger or whatever, that there are options out there. Now, granted, they're not in the lobby of the medical center, and I concur with you. I think there should be some retail stores in that parking structure. I didn't realize that security was moving in instead. The last I heard, they were planning
And the
to do
medical center is about to eliminate the fryer in their cafeteria. So no more chili cheese fries. So that's going to drive even more people into the arms of McDonald's. Okay, so anybody else from the community want to speak? I saw a momentary rise of some people. Okay, come on, Georgia Hodgkin. Please state your Lawton Avenue address. We seem to have an over-representation of my neighbors.
I think you all know how I feel about this ordinance. I happen to teach a course that focuses on what Ellen White taught should be the role of our institutions. The hospital should be teaching patients to eat vegetarian diets. So as much as I love Brother Kelton, putting McDonald's in the lobby is not a good plan. And coffee is not a good plan either. I stress that. I support this ordinance that we have good, nourishing food. I teach nutrition. Let's serve good food in our community. Thank you. You know what I think. Yes.
So you want to serve man healthy food?
People.
Yes. Okay, so men and women.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from the public? We take citizen comments as well as visitors and landowners.
Take that as an open invitation.
I goaded him.
I say this with my name is James Krause. I am a property owner, not a resident of the city, but I work here. And I come before you at great risk of upending the momentum in the direction that it is already going by opening my yap, but I'll take the chance briefly. This is, Dr. Rigsby, or Mayor Rigsby, I'm sorry, you mentioned that this issue takes you from your philosophical moorings. So not for tonight, but just for future, I want to supplement what Georgia was saying and counter what this gentleman said. I don't see a distinction in the physiology of the people that come into this town as our guests and customers from the physiology of the residents. This particular issue is focused as much on community taste, or not so much on community taste, but on the role of the city to foster the health, safety, prosperity, and thriving of its citizenry. To me, not a religious issue at all. Well, that's fortunate given my background. But it is an issue of science. The evidence is mounting and I'm not the right person to represent the science, but as I go through life as a functioning, hopefully intelligent human being, you summarize certain things. And you rely on information that you hear from experts. From what I understand, it is an overwhelming scientific consensus now that the standard American diet, or SAD, exemplified especially by an overindulgence in fast food, leads to some of the chronic health problems that are widely experienced in our country. And they're for children, they're for adults, they're for seniors, and it's reaching crisis proportions. Now, from a strictly business model point of view, if you are in the health business, I can't think of a better business model to ensure your revenue stream than put fast food in the lobby of your hospital, because you're guaranteeing a turnover for your cardio program and great revenue stream. But I don't think that's what the leaders of this community are about. And I say leaders using the term leadership. It's partly establishing direction. The reason this issue seems so incendiary, is such a lightning rod, is the bigger issue that it brings into focus. Now I'm really at risk here. So let me think if I even want to go here. Okay. Hear me as just looking at the issue, not taking a position. What it brings into focus is the very substantial economic and clout of the corporate structure to foster and further certain kinds of products which work to ensure their bottom line. And I'm not chastising our whole way of life or going against capitalism. I know the mayor thinks I'm a socialist. It's not about that. What I'm trying to set the tone is for a common set of facts that it is a true statement that when you weld that much economic power, you wield a lot of influence. And it is the charter of those businesses and institutions to use that in a way that furthers their own goals. So they are less apt to be as concerned about the health impacts of the products that they sell than they are the profitability of those products. Certainly less concerned than our universities, schools, and scientists and Department of Public Health. So it is that overwhelming force that this council has the power to counter in some of its decisions to try to lead and foster and create a healthier community. I'm very gratified that this body is looking at this as line drawing as much as community taste and seems to be reaching a consensus position that the people that choose to frequent those places for their meals have that option. Nobody's being denied that. But I would hate to leave this forum tonight and have you feel like you are abrogating the freedom somehow of your population by drawing that line. Now, for some reason, bars, brothels, dispensaries, all don't invoke any controversy whatsoever. But from a philosophical and logical point of view, if total freedom of choice is where you're going, you've got to admit that those are not a problem at all, and we should open the doors. The reason they are a problem is that it's obvious that a city does have a right to take a leadership role in fostering the health of its community. So I'm going to end where I started. This is an issue of science. And the science is in the products that are being sold, not all of them, but the majority menu of your new establishment with its yellow and white banner that's just coming up today, are not products that are healthful for the population, certainly relative to others. So have no fear to exercise your power to try to help guide, prod, lead, push, whatever it takes to bring about a healthier citizenry today and in the future, and let us make perhaps more intelligent choices. I'll leave it to George and the scientists to talk about addiction and the absolute evidence that some of those menu choices go right beyond the part of the human brain that's involved in logical, objective decision-making and move right into the place of addiction. And their marketing reflects it. Anyway, I go on.
No. Wait, while you're here.
Yes, sir.
Because we have you on record, I just have to do this.
Please.
So can I get you, when we talk about big business, could you give your feeling and opinion on drug companies and insurance companies?
The only
too
reason,
much? If it's too much, it's okay.
All that would serve to do would either be to discredit me as some kind of, heretic that doesn't understand how our system works. And secondly, it's impossible that's like saying, can you give me your opinion about God or romance or something? There are so many facets to it. It's far too complex an institution to just say, well, I think it's good or I think it's bad. My real message is that we ought to pay a lot of attention to our scientists who tell us those things that lead to consequences. And when we have an epidemic of obesity and heart disease and other problems that derive from our dietary choices, and you have another body of scientists that tell us that people suffer literally from addiction to those things, from the combination of marketing and the biochemical methods that those things tweak our brains, it's worth taking a look at and saying, gee, isn't there some other way that maybe this impetus towards a more plant-based healthful. The diet that you use, that you eat, is really, I mean, wouldn't you like to see, unlike this other gentleman, I'm picking on you, I'm sorry, don't you have more care for your fellow humans, even if they're not Loma Linda denizens, that they eat a better diet? If it works for you, why wouldn't it work for them? I'm playing.
Still not talking to the group of people that come every day.
What I would like to do is through...
Loma Linda, this is all great.
They are my fellow human being brothers and sisters, and if we are a town that is to provide leadership in health, I'd certainly like to see us lead by example, and through having excellent choices of healthier foods, show them that they can taste good and be convenient as well, and maybe motivate them to try something new. Terrific. Then we're in agreement. Can I answer any other probing philosophical questions?
I think we'll take your position that maybe we can take this opportunity to help them lead a better future, because sometimes you can have a better effect on the world by showing McDonald's a better way than by shunning them completely. But that's against the point of this.
Well, and there's no danger of that in this town tonight. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
I think in some respects, McDonald's has kind of shown us a better way, especially with that big institution they have right across the street from the hospital.
But I think what this points out, just from a political perspective, is that I can reuse all of my signs from my last campaign that talked about balance. So let's try to balance all these different needs. I'll save some money on yard signs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other public comment? We have extracted a lot for just having one comment sheet. Okay, I hope nobody thinks that we've shut off discussion, because up here everybody's getting tired. Okay, I'll close the public session. Now, I've got a question of the city attorney. This was not written as a public hearing. Does that mean we have violated protocol and need to do another one?
Well, no, I thought last meeting it had been continued to tonight as a public hearing, so there's no problem with having extra hearings.
Okay.
It's only an issue if you fail to have the required hearings. So.
Yeah, I'm just referring to the notice element of it.
Well, I think there was adequate notice at the last meeting that it was being continued till tonight.
Okay, so having heard that, we can start beating up the document itself. Does anybody have any markups? I think that most of the concerns I had about typos and things were taken care of, but there's a section under the definitions that has still quite a few minor but kind of comical typos that I don't know whether those are substantive enough to require another reading, but I've got my little editor's marks all over them.
Well, any typographical type corrections would not be sufficient to require a new first reading. You can simply bring those to the attention of staff, and when they finalize it for the next second reading or final action, those will be incorporated. If there's anything substantive, you would want to make that known on the record tonight, and that could be interlineated tonight. But if there's merely a grammatical correction that doesn't change the meaning, then that does not need to be done on the record. You can simply pass that on to staff.
Can you draw our attention to the changes that address my concerns from last meeting about describing what constitutes a closure of a restaurant?
Well, upon review of the ordinances that are currently on the books, we felt it wasn't necessary to restate that. Under Section 17-105-010, B, there's some language that has to do with nonconforming uses, and we specifically added to paragraph 4 under that a reference to the nonconforming use chapter of our current municipal code, and that does include language that in section 1722.040A1 regarding the abandonment or discontinuance of a non-conforming use. And the time period set forth in our current code is 180 days. So we did not feel it necessary to restate that.
It's covered elsewhere. That's good.
Yes.
Any other comments?
I have a question. To answer your other question might be what the definition of is, for the grammar, so you got to be careful with that.
Yeah. Is and are both together in the same sentence.
Yes. As the newest member of the council, I often find myself with lots of questions, legal questions. Let's say we pass this, and then a year from now, some new fast food restaurant that has a market cap of McDonald's now, and it's strictly vegetarian, McVeggies or something like that, comes in and wants to put a fast food restaurant in here with a drive-through, and the community would be happy with that. What would we have to do to be able to do that? Would this have to be totally amended, or how would that work?
We would do this again.
Yes, you would need to amend the municipal code because as it's drafted tonight, it doesn't address the vegetarian or non-vegetarian nature of the food products. So you would have to make an amendment to, if you wanted to permit that type of business.
Amendment to say, okay, we're going to amend the code to let this one restaurant go in here, or you'd have to.
It wouldn't be for a specific restaurant. It would be, you would have to amend it so that
The class of restaurants.
that class would not be prohibited.
Are these deep fried veggies you're thinking of?
No. Yeah, I'm going to start a company. No, I was just wondering, is this something that you end up boxing yourself into? Then you want to do something, and then
deep fried cannabis.
Yeah, exactly. And then the shoe's on the other foot. I don't know. I'm just looking ahead. I'm wondering what's. So this would totally take out any drive-through restaurant, even if it. But if you found one that you really wanted to put in, you would have to go through this whole process all over again.
Yes, most likely. The ordinance that was prepared and submitted for your consideration deals with these formula-based fast food restaurants, but that, if you go through the definition, it's fairly broad and in its application. Most of those factors would apply to virtually most small restaurants that serve takeout. So you would have to, the only real distinguishing factor is the drive-through aspect. So you could have a fast food vegetarian or non-vegetarian restaurant as long as it doesn't have drive-through.
I was just saying, I only said vegetarian because then that would get, everybody would agree that's something that nobody would fight it, right? So, sorry. If it was one that was palatable to everybody, I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. And it had a drive-through, and it was the desire of people to have that, we would have to amend this whole thing.
Yes.
The whole thing.
Okay, this is the first reading. And let's say we like it as it is. What do? We set it for a second reading and declare this the first reading?
Yes. This is
Okay.
the introduction, and final action would be at your next scheduled meeting.
We anticipate there will be a meeting on September 24th to accommodate a schedule. We could set it for a second reading at that time.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the council? If you like it, we would set a second reading, and we don't approve it tonight. We just count this as the first. We read it by name only, or do we have to do that the second time?
We would do that at the second meeting.
Okay.
So you would move approval on first reading and to set the second reading for the date Pam just gave.
There you have it.
You're asking for direction from us? I'll go ahead and move Council Bill 02013-03 for first reading. Development Code Amendment 13-080 to define and add specific provisions and regulations relating to formula-based fast food restaurants.
And set the second reading for September 24th.
And set the second reading for September the 24th.
Your mic on first. Too much suspense. I'll second the motion.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Is there any opposition? I hear none, unless there's some kind of signal that I haven't picked up on. That means the motion passes. So we will consider this again on September 24 for final adoption or not. The next item is number 7, agreement between the city and Loma University. We need to have a drawing of straws because we have 4 of the 5 of us have conflicts of interest.
Pursuant to our previous practice and procedure, I prepared the 4 straws, 2 of which are marked vote, meaning that you will vote on the action and participate, and all but Councilman Duper will draw a straw. Yeah. And these are based upon employment or other income from the LUASC institutions.
All right, so let's go ahead and get moving to item number 7. Mr. Jarb, do you have a report for us on this item?
Yes, this is the proposal, the agreement with the university to widen Campus Street from Barton Road to the new road called Mona Way. When the university proposing the 7-story parking structure, the city conditioned them to widen the campus street on the west side of campus so that it lined up with the existing parking structure, curb and gutter. And so when we did that, we have a section of Campus Street between Barton Road and this Mona Way, which is the road that come out of the new parking structure. It's kind of bottleneck that need to be widening. And so I have been working with the university to see what can we do to get that accomplished. So we come up with an agreement on see if we can split the cost for do the street improvement. The university went ahead and did the design and willing to pay for half of the construction cost and dedicate the additional right-of-way as required for this project. The city will be responsible for pay that half of the construction cost, do the construction management, bid the project, pay for the geotechnical services, and do the inspection for the project. So that pretty much an agreement between the city and the university. Yeah, sorry. This is what the street improvement plan looked like when we go out for construction. Sorry, this is not quite as fancy as architecture drawing. The north is to your right. That's okay. The north direction is to right. Okay, this is the proposed seven-story parking structure under construction. And because the structure is built over the existing prospect to the right, we conditioned them to put in a Mona Way that will connect Campus Street to San Juan Street to the west. Okay? San Juan Street going south and come out to the frontage road over here that connect to Campus Street. So what we are doing is we will add additional lane for southbound. So we will have a free right turn movement that can come south here and turn right onto to Barton Road, going westbound. We are proposing to cul-de-sac off the San Juan to prevent the traffic that what they're doing right now is the traffic stacking up over here, and the car that want to turn have a stack up over here to go around and be able to turn into San Juan. So by cul-de-sac it off, you can't do that anymore. You have to come down to Mona Way and going west.
I see. So West Hall would be just south of, what is that, Molnar Way?
The West Hall is a nursing school?
Right.
Yes, nursing school is right here.
Okay.
Yes, this is nursing. This is the engineering.
Does it affect trees and existing sidewalk?
We're going to move all of that. We remove part of the trees, and we're going to move the sidewalk back.
And are you saying move or remove?
Well, we have to remove the existing and build a new one.
Okay, new sidewalk. What about trees?
They have to be removed.
So there will be no trees along
Correct.
the sidewalk?
We're going to be working with the university to plant some more trees in front of the building here.
So the current parking structure, the sidewalk that's in front of it is going to be moved back?
No, parking structure is okay.
Off the slide. You said the agreement was that they had to measure up with the new structure. The old structure had to measure up with the new structure?
Yeah.
The old structure is already matched. The proposed building here, the new one, is matching existing structure.
And that's already far enough west?
Correct.
It's wider than what campus is north of?
Correct. Right now is additional parking, the diagonal parking in front of the existing parking structure.
Oh, so it just eliminates the parking space?
Eventually, yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, you said you're removing sidewalk and trees as well. How many feet are we talking about? From the curb in, how many feet are coming out in order to add another lane?
About 12 feet, additional lane.
Okay, but how?
The diagonal parking, he was...
You're adding two lanes, you're adding one on the other side. One for southbound and one for...
No, I'm only talking about southbound.
Yeah.
To make it easy, this is the, what building is that, Jeff?
That's formerly Hughes Mortuary, currently the bioengineering department.
Yes.
So between the parking stall and moving the curb, you're going to get 12 feet?
The diagonal parking he was referring
to the north.
was in front of the old parking structure.
Yeah.
Remember how the cars used to go in there at a diagonal?
By eliminating that.
Now, as you come south up campus,
It's all
the
lined up.
bottleneck's in front of West Hall and Hughes Mortuary. So that curb and gutter, sidewalk, and trees will be moved back to the sidewalk of the current parking structure.
And so what?
And then that parking would be eliminated because that would be a lane of traffic now all the way from University to Barton Road.
So I understand all of that, but what I'm still unclear on is forget the street parking that was there. When we take from the curb west, how many feet are coming out?
About 12 feet.
12 feet.
Yes.
I thought 12 feet included the parking space.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Here, I'm sorry. Here. This is campus. This
Right.
is Prospect. You see this? This is existing parking structure right here.
Right.
And the existing diagonal parking is over here.
Yeah.
And you see the curb right here is already to the ultimate width.
Right.
When you come over here, you see that it's a jog right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? When the university built the new 7-story parking structure, they pretty much extended the building further to the south here. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So what we are doing is extend this curb all the way down to Barton Road.
And I understand that. Where my question is if you drive south in front of West Hall, the nursing school there, no down right there,
Yes.
are you going to open your door right at the front entrance because there's no sidewalk or trees or anything there? Is there going to be any landscaping in front of West Hall? Nursing school.
Yes, I'm
right there.
This is yes, a little bit. Because you see this, the buildings can stay. So the sidewalk will be pretty much right at the front of the door there and go across.
So you'll walk out the door onto the street.
For this one, you walk out the door into the sidewalk.
Yeah, okay.
But
It's visually deceptive because it looks like you still have the bottleneck. If that building stays there, the bottleneck's right where your pointer's at.
Right.
There's still a bottleneck.
Believe it or not, it's lined up with this. You come down, it just missed that. You come down, boom. It lined up.
I just don't want Jan Nick to get run over when she walks out the front door of her building.
We met with her. We met with the School of Nursing and these people that work in this building right here.
Okay. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
And we're going to close off this San Juan
Yeah.
for true traffic, but we have a gate for the emergency vehicle to drive through. And our goal is eventually, can you move further north, Joe? Our goal eventually will keep on going down some more. You see this? Now the bottleneck will become from University to Stewart Street.
Yeah.
So I will be working with the university to see what can we do to widen this section from here to there.
Okay, if we can come south on the slide again, can you show me where the San Juan cul-de-sac is going to be exactly?
Right at campus, right here.
Right there.
Right.
Okay.
Right here.
And so cars will not be able to get from the San Juan cul-de-sac onto campus?
It will now come
Only
over here.
Loma. Okay, that makes sense.
Yes. And oh, he's not here. Dr. Leonard asked, can we have a pedestrian bridge? Yes, there will be. University is proposing a pedestrian bridge from here, which is the new parking structure, all the way across. In interim, we moved the traffic signal from Prospect over here to Mona Way.
Okay.
You know, what nobody's asked is what's the capacity of that bridge because there's a lot of traffic that crosses that.
It's pedestrian bridge. We haven't worked with university to start the design yet. So.
It's small.
Oh no, it will be big enough to. But what's so nice about university is they have different shift, so not everybody come in and out at the same time. So the staff recommendation is for the city council to approve the agreement between the city and university. Thank you.
I'll move it.
Quick question. After this gets approved, then the actual project itself gets approved again because it's just a memorandum, or what happens next?
Next is for the next city council meeting, you will be awarding the contract to the contractor to start construction.
Okay.
And that not require the conflict of interest. It's just award a contract to the contractors.
Seeing a motion for approval and hearing no opposition, it's so moved. We can bring the gentleman back in. There was no public.
No, we don't want
hearing
to
on
hear
this.
from you. You had your no.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dobie.
It was part of when the university proposed the 7-story parking structure, and it was part of environmental impact for them to do all this work, to put in a new road and close off the cul-de-sac off San Juan, connecting to Campus Street. Yes.
That's true.
I'm actually eager to hear the debate.
I'm not.
And Andres is better poised to say this than I am, but at the community meetings that we had on a variety of topics.
If you want to stand up and talk at the.
Back me up, Andres.
There were a number of topics the community concerned, and the food environment was only one of them. There was also walkability. And people, quite a few people that attended this meeting were given little red circles to mark that part of Loma Linda which they found the most disconcerting, the part they hated the most. And all those little red dots lined up along the existing Anderson because of the width of the street and the volume of cars. So what's being proposed here, and I'm not saying this is easy and I'm not taking a position, but this is the antithesis of walkability. We're just creating another one of those man-car interfaces with a lot of traffic going one way and a lot of people trying to get across the other way. So it's very likely going to become another place that if people voted, they would find they really hate it. That's all.
You have a recommendation of an alternative.
Wings. No, of course I don't have an immediate one. I mean, there's so many other pieces of that puzzle that have to fit together. But maybe instead of just one big behemoth pedestrian causeway, maybe the possibility of more than one. I don't know.
It was noted earlier, and a lot of us are waiting for bicycle paths and running trails and things like that, too, throughout the city.
For clarification, this is one of the mitigation measures that were required as part of the second parking structure construction. What Jarb's bringing before you is the financial arrangement to pay for that mitigation, but the discussion and the public hearing and the environmentals were all covered as part of the construction of that parking structure.
Thank you.
We almost fell asleep back there. That was a long discussion.
They liked the way I handled it quickly.
Okay, I take it number 8 is next, correct?
Number 8.
Go ahead.
Certificate of appropriateness for demolition of Franz Hall at Loma Linda Academy. In November of 2008, the Planning Commission, and in December of 2008, the City Council approved construction of about 78,000 square feet of new facilities at Loma Linda Academy, and as part of that, demolition of 45,000 square feet of existing facilities, which is what's commonly known as Franz Hall. One of the conditions of approval of that is that a certificate of appropriateness be obtained from the Historical Commission relative to the destruction of that. Typically what happens is the certificate of appropriateness is obtained, then the Planning Commission, then the Council rules on whether or not it should be demolished. So for whatever reason, at that time, the cart was put before the horse. On August 9th...
So that means it goes from City Council to Planning Commission?
Well, typically it goes from Historical Commission to
Planning Commission.
Determine the appropriateness for the demolition of that structure, how that structure, whether it should even be destroyed, what portions, if it's not, can be reused, maintained, preserved, and then those recommendations will go to Planning Commission and to City Council. At this particular instance, in 2008, Planning Commission, Council both went forward with approval for the project and said, Historical Commission, you need to give us a certificate of appropriateness. So without any other definition for them. So it did not necessarily follow the normal procedure. August 19th, the Historical Commission held a public hearing to determine a certificate of appropriateness and whether or not the structure should be demolished or what the outcome of that structure is. There's a fairly lengthy report. You have the report from CRM Tech available. Their main points were that the structure is a locally significant historic structure, that there's some alternatives for mitigation, one of them being that the building be preserved and rehabilitated, reused in total in place, another that demolition should occur with photo recordation and archiving significant portions and significant pieces of the building. The Planning Commission, let me make sure everything, Planning Commission moved and forwarded to council that the structure be partially demolished and that the chapel portion, the hallway, be demolished, that the existing front facade and the front rooms be preserved and placed into some type of adaptive reuse. Staff is presenting Planning Commission's recommendation, or sorry, Historical Commission, too many commissions, Historical Commission's recommendation to the council. Council will either accept that recommendation or deny that recommendation. I believe the chairman of the Planning Commission, Jim Shoup.
Historical.
I'm sorry.
City Council.
The chairman of the Historical Commission, Jim Shoup, is here, and I believe he'd like you make a comment. Would like to make a comment. And then I think we have a slip from Doug, right? Doug Herman? Yes.
You do not live on Lawton Avenue.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. The Historical Commission exists because of a chapter in our city code. It was Chapter 17. I'm not sure if it's been renumbered now. I brought the wrong folder tonight with the old version of it. But let me read one paragraph of it, which is our charge, our primary purpose as a historical commission. That is to safeguard the city's unique cultural heritage as embodied and reflected in the city's architectural history and patterns of cultural development. So we look at Franz Hall, and as Conrad suggested, it has been a case of the cart before the horse, sort of a 5-year lapse in the process, and it's been out of order, so that put the Historical Commission in an unenviable position of having to make a determination after others have already determined it. Nevertheless, we wanted to do our duty as a historical commission, so we looked at the McKenna Hathaway windshield survey, which was done back in the 1980s, which identified Franz Hall as a building of local historical significance, and then the CRM Tech Historical Resources Study, which the Academy commissioned, was done by professionals in architectural history, and they also recognized it as a building significant in local history. That leaves the commission then with the issue of, since this building is recognized as being of significance to the community, potentially being preservable, that is, we should recommend preservation of it, where in this spectrum of expectations do we lie? Do we take a hardline preservation approach and say, no, you must preserve it exactly as it is and make no changes to it, to the opposite end of that spectrum, which is tear it down, do whatever you want with it, maybe take some pictures before you do it, but do it. And the input that we got from members of the community, from members of the commission, some of them who are experts in history and in preservation matters, were that the facade of the building, the part that faces Anderson Street, is an iconic identifying mark of the Academy. It has been there for a long time. In another facade, it's been there since the 30s, possibly even before that. At least some of the materials were. The Art Deco facade that we're familiar with has been there since the 40s, since the building partially burned. And it is one of the identifiers of the Academy. It is part of an Art Deco theme that runs through the Loma Linda University Central Campus, the 4 main buildings of the old campus, and then also that building, Franz Hall, which was a very brief period in Loma Linda's history where Art Deco somehow caught on and became the flavor of institutional buildings. So it was our recommendation that the Academy be asked to preserve the east wing of the building, to either leave it in place and decide somewhere down the road when they are actually ready to do something with that piece of real estate, which they're not ready at this point, they indicate, that that small section, a few thousand square feet, could either be moved further to the north in front of Rhodes Hall, which is a rather nondescript utility building for the industrial arts program, or possibly at that point be replaced with something of new construction that would be reminiscent of the facade. So we leave it with you as a city council to take their appeal if they make one. We've given our best evaluation of a compromise between preservation and the definite need of the academy to expand. Has a larger student body than it did back in 1946 and 47, and we recognize that. So we feel like we've taken a middle ground, a balanced approach, if you will, Mr. Mayor, and tried to find something in between, and we'll leave that final decision with you. You take what we have suggested as a recommendation and go with it. And I'm here for questions if you have them.
What do you think is the economic impact on the Academy of your recommendation as opposed to a complete demolition?
In the near future, it's a cost-saving measure because they don't have to demolish part of the building. And I say that with some seriousness. They do not have an immediate need for that square footage of ground. That is, there is no plan in the works. There's no active fundraising going on to build a new something to put there, although there is a wish down the road to do that. The commission was not given any hard facts. There were some numbers thrown around about the cost of preserving it, maintaining it, and all of that. I wouldn't put any of those in the category of an engineering study or an architect's feasibility study, so we really don't know what it would cost to preserve 4,500 square feet of that building or to move it. But I do know that schools always find a use for square footage. So I'm sure there's a way for that to be used productively until such time as the Academy needs to build something new in its place.
It's been my experience with, and I'm not an architect or a builder or anything, that it's more expensive to graft new construction onto old than to just tear it down and start over again. So I don't know.
That can be. I interviewed the lead architect on the Mission School project, and their analysis was that it costs approximately 50% as much to renovate Mission School as it would to have replaced it with a new building of the same capacity.
Do you happen to know what was the final cost of rehabbing the Mission School?
I do not.
Okay.
I have a question if nobody else has another one. If I, just for purposes of my clarification, the CRM tech study basically gave two alternatives. One was a complete tear down, and the second offered three elements of mitigation. But none of those mitigation factors included preserving any part of the building, correct?
Correct.
So
CRM Tech basically went to the opposite ends of the spectrum,
right,
with nothing in the middle. So,
but there were three mitigation factors to preserve historical elements of the building.
Certainly, and those all can be acceptable mitigation. They're part of the Secretary of Interior's recommendations, but they fall more at the we're really not preserving anything but photographs and maybe a few plaques or signage or something like that. Right. So in terms of historic preservation, it's not very meaty, it's not too substantial. It's a minimum standard, and it's one that we ask the university or other institutions to do, even when a building is not terribly significant. They're still asked to do the photo documentation and to preserve any architectural features, if any. This is a unique situation. In my 10 years, 12 years on the commission, this is probably the most significant building that we have discussed because of its relation to community history, to local church, parochial school education, to its location and its architecture. So CRM Tech identified 4 out of 9 factors on the Secretary of the Interior's list, potential factors that could help decide whether it's significant. I tend to think it's closer to 7 out of 9, but even with 4 out of 9, that is a substantial interest that the community has in trying to preserve it. And that's what our historic preservation city code suggests, is that we should make every attempt to try to preserve significant historical resources.
Okay, I didn't quite follow how you define significant historical, so I'll take your word for it. But it seems to me that to preserve what would be a mere facade of the previous building, it loses a lot of its historical significance at that point. I mean, it's a facade that's out there of no real purpose except we like to see what it used to look like.
We're talking about a wing,
what's that?
A wing of a building, not a facade. So it was not our recommendation that the facade be preserved, but that a wing of the building be preserved.
Well, and I'll be interested to hear from the representatives from the Academy as to just what they would do with that one wing of the building. I have a hard time. It seems like if it's a historical building, it's a historical building, and you keep it because of its historical value for all of the things that happened there. To just keep one wing of the building, the logic escapes me.
It's actually a part of a potential mitigation. The mitigations are on a full spectrum, from total preservation, partial preservation, photo documentation, or do nothing more than tear it down and we'll forget about it. And so we did take a middle ground between total demolition and total preservation.
But the mitigation that was described did not include retaining one
That's
wing
correct.
of the building.
We deviated from CRM Tech's recommendation on that.
Yeah.
We had a finding that it was more significant than they did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is this the appropriate time to get comment from the Academy?
Yes.
Mr.
Just procedurally, not sure if I might.
Okay.
Your action tonight is to either ratify what the Historic Commission has already decided at their public hearing, or if you choose to not ratify it, then it would still need to be set for a future public hearing to discuss an alternative. You could not take an action tonight, do anything different than what the Historic Commission has previously done.
Okay, but it is appropriate for us to entertain either agreement or objection to the proposal from the Academy. Okay.
You certainly may, and that would go into your decision to ratify or not ratify.
Okay. Mr. Herman. Dr. Herman.
Doug Herman, I am in Loma. I
Headmaster Herman.
Unfortunately do not live on Barton. I'm stuck on Huron Street.
Okay. How do you like those stop signs?
That was what I almost asked that question earlier. Yeah. Did we do something with the Loma Street?
I suggested we do something, and where is that?
I encourage us to move along in that direction. However, we appreciate the amount of time and interest that the Historical Commission spent on regarding Loma Academy's Franz Hall. We all agree that it is a building that has significant part of Loma Academy and, of course, by its location to the city. We do not take lightly our stewardship of these resources. It is precisely this reason we come to you asking that you not accept the resolution before you by the Historical Commission. As we've said, we are being asked to keep that, what we shall refer, it has been referred to as the east wing of the complex. We would have permission to remove the west portion, consisting of the chapel and the library and the hallway with the offices. This would necessitate surgically separating the hallway from the east wing, slicing from the roof down through the foundation. The remaining structure would need to be secured, the opening closed, the building repaired to assure that it would not be damaged in the interim. In short, not removing the east wing would not result in any savings from the estimated cost of removing the entire structure. Rather, it would postpone the inevitable destruction and ultimately such a time till costs are greater. One might suggest that we make the building useful In researching the possibility, we determined that renovating the east wing and bringing it up to current safety and building codes would cost an estimated $2.9 million. For this investment, we would receive 4 classrooms, 2 offices, 2 bathrooms, and would limit the use of space for much-needed North Campus auditorium. That estimate is based on our architecture's initial look at this and study of what he knows of the building. Some may say that it's just a matter of what we choose to afford. However, at the end of the day, we have only a limited amount of funds. Because we are currently paying back a significant purchase of bond money used to construct 2 new buildings on campus, our board has made it abundantly clear that we cannot borrow any more for construction. Any capital projects must be accomplished on a pay-as-you-go basis with money raised. Currently, there are 2 more pressing needs that must be addressed, which require us to raise $4.5 million. And according to our master plan, a North Campus meeting hall would best go on the current site of Franz Hall. Estimates for such structures range anywhere from $8 to $12 million or more, depending on what people have a fancy to build. So what would we do with an empty building that has no power and no water as these services enter for the building from the portion that would be destroyed? How long would we have this building that is an empty shell, a target for vandals and invitation to vagrants? We believe, therefore, the best solution for the students and the efficient functioning of the school is to demolish the entire building. Frankly, we've not heard any argument for keeping the structure that speaks to why it would be best for students or for the fundamental purpose of the school. We believe that the richness of its heritage and the memory of the man for whom it was named 25 years ago can be memorialized in other ways that will be meaningful and accessible, and an option that was proposed by the historical study required of us by the Commission. Therefore, we ask that you not adopt this motion of the Historical Commission and that grant us the certificate of appropriateness and allow us to move forward with our plans.
You've read the CRM Tech study?
Yes.
And the 3 different elements of mitigation, and are you supportive of those? Or
absolutely. In fact, we would enlarge upon those. We'd like to see it also included an online option as well, but we've already making plans along those same 3.
So you're all in with the mitigation
with that plan B, yes, of the CRM Tech.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? What's your pleasure?
In general, I would agree that we must do everything we can to attempt to preserve historical buildings. The challenge always becomes, well, who does a building belong to, and how much power does the city have in pushing someone to do something with a building which they can or cannot afford. So that is always a challenge. Having gone to school there and actually having taken many classes there, it is sad to see a building go by the wayside, but unfortunately that's part of life. A part of me, looking back in retrospect, it seems like when they built the brand new building, maybe there should have been an effort made into making that building somehow match the old building. That never happened. So right now you have a huge dichotomy between buildings. I mean, that's this big change night and day. I think that if we had the money as a city or some private citizen was willing to donate money to preserve it, I would be more in favor of it. The other challenge that it presents in keeping it is, if I recall correctly, when the master plan was approved, it was approved under the notion that the academy really actually wouldn't grow and there wouldn't be any additional space. Preserving that building actually would give them the opportunity to grow, and that would be kind of counter what was proposed, because they basically approved a plan that said we're going to remodel our campus and bring it up to code, but not increase the amount of classrooms. And I think preserving that building would actually open that up for increasing classrooms, which wasn't in the first agreement. Other than that, as sad as it is, I would not recommend we follow the Historical Commission. It's not a motion, just an opinion. Do you want a motion? I'll make the motion if you want me to.
Well, I think if we're not going to approve the Historical Commission plan, then we have to formally reject it and then set a hearing for the next meeting?
Yes, I think your motion would be to not ratify the decision of the Historic Commission and set it for a public hearing to take further action at the next meeting.
So I move that we not ratify the Historical Commission's recommendation and move that we set a public hearing as to what the next step should be when that happens. It may not necessarily be at the next council meeting.
And I'll second that with a comment, and that is that my wife will tell you I'm a real nut about history. I read history books all the time, and I believe local history is just as important as national history. But to go halfway, just the logic escapes me, and with the budgetary implications, I second the motion to not accept or not ratify the report.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Is there any opposition to the motion? I see no opposition. The motion's approved. Thank the Historical Commission for your diligent work on this. You guys do a great job. And I think you made a good, noble attempt at coming up with a compromise. And it sounds like it didn't sail this time, but don't be discouraged. You guys do good work. Next item on our agenda is reports of councilmen. Hearing none, reports of officers. Hearing none, we'll adjourn the City Council. We'll move immediately to the successor organization, successor agency to the RDA.
Can I make one comment regarding the, did you want to say something about the grand opening of the Mountain View Bridge? I mean, that could have, it's not in our city, but it's an extension from our city. And that's coming up soon.
Yes, I just received an invitation today, but I forgot the date.
Yeah.
I'll tell the date. In fact, we'll bring it up twice because it's actually on September the 25th, and we do have another City Council, maybe have another City Council meeting on the 24th, you were thinking?
Right.
Okay. So I guess we'll bring it up as well then. But, I mean, we can announce it now. For anybody who's interested, the Mountain View Bridge is about to be opened at 12 o'clock, September 25th, and that's a major, major artery that's going to assist us in decreasing the traffic on Anderson, so it's very much welcomed.
Okay. Getting back to the successor agency, are there any items to be added or deleted?
No, sir.
Would the public like to speak on any items not on the agenda? Hearing none, we have the consent calendar.
I move it.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion, any opposition? Hearing none, it's approved. We are adjourned. We move to the Housing Authority. Are there any items to be added or deleted?
No, sir.
Would the public like to speak on any items not on the agenda? Hearing none, the consent calendar is there.
I move it.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Is there any opposition? Hearing none, are there any chair or board member reports?
I had a quick question on the demands register. You moved so quickly, I didn't get a chance to look
Okay.
at it. I'm just curious, the community advisor, are those the folks that talked to us earlier today? Question on the demands register. Yeah, it says community advisor, professional services. Are those the same folks that were here today? Or is that somebody different? It's the amount of $3,847. The people who did the housing element for us, are those the same people? No. That's somebody else.
LLHA, which is the...
Community Advisors is the organization that assists with various housing activities, such as if we buy or sell homes, the certification of applicants for income qualifications and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
I got something that I was just going to add real quick, of interest maybe. This just came out today. League of Cities has taken swift action to oppose a recent gut and amend bill that severely limits cities' current ability to ban or regulate medical cannabis dispensaries and authorizes an entirely new horizon of marijuana use and commercial for-profit sales. But luckily, they're not going to be able to do it at a drive-through in Loma Linda.
Okay, are there, yeah, and they have to serve it within 7 minutes. Okay. Are there any reports of officers? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you for entertaining us for the last 2 hours. I missed my goal of finishing the meeting in 5 minutes, but we'll try again next time.